Welcome, everybody. Give us 1 or 2 minutes and we will get started. Awesome. Hey, everybody. We're maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. The attendee number is starting to hit critical mass. We've got an exciting show today. Really happy to see almost 100 people logging on. Yep, we got a few more coming in. I think we're going to crest 100 live folks today. This is close to a record. Yeah, let's kick this off. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. David Valancourt here, CEO and founder of the GMP Collective. Other hats that are familiar to folks is the board chair and founder of the S3 Collective, maybe a theme there coming on, and vice chair of ASTM International's Committee D37 on cannabis, creating market relevant cannabis voluntary consensus standards. I'm really excited to have everybody here. We've got an amazing show. This is our 23rd episode. We are coming up on our 2-year anniversary, and this is for you guys, you in the audience. We've got these amazing panel of experts that we put on the hot seat. We've got some great questions that came in. If questions come to mind during the show, use the Q&A button, submit it. There's an option to submit it anonymously as well if you want to protect the guilty or innocent. And we will do our best to get to everything. We got a lot of questions during the registration process. So if we don't get to it, we will do our best to follow up with you all after. Let's see, other housekeeping items. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. This is recorded, as are all of our episodes. They are available on our YouTube channel. So if you've got to drop off for some unfortunate reason or have a colleague that wants to access this, make sure to let them know once our email comes out in a few days after this recording finishes, that you can forward that link along to them to watch in perpetuity. So with that, Bethany, take us away. You're muted. There we go.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm happy to be your moderator of When Things Go Wrong, where we discuss various challenges and issues within the cannabis and hemp industry. I'm the director of content strategy and market growth here at the GMP Collective, where we offer technical and strategic advising, client referral, and webinar sponsorship opportunities. Hopefully my voice makes it through this webinar. I have a tinge of a summer cold, so forgive me. But let's get started. You all know David Valancourt, CEO of the GMP Collective, co-founder of the S3 Collective, and vice chair of the ASTM International Committee D37 on cannabis. We have 3 guests today to talk about vaporizer safety. First is Darwin Millard, colloquially known as the Spock of cannabis. He's focused on the extraction and manufacturing of nutraceutical products containing cannabinoids for nearly 2 decades, helping companies live long and process by implementing cost-effective, purpose-driven phytocannabinoid processing and herbal product manufacturing solutions. Darwin is an award-winning member of ASTM International's Technical Committee D37 on cannabis, a group dedicated to the development of voluntary consensus standards for the global cannabis and hemp industry. Today, Darwin continues to champion the benefits of standardization as the technical director for Cannabis Safety and Quality, CSQ, the first accredited certification program to meet ISO requirements and regulatory requirements from seed to sale for the manufacture of cannabinoid-containing products. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Shawna Vreeke. She's head of research and toxicology at Terpenes, where she's instrumental in developing and maintaining the rigorous safety protocols the brand is known for. She completed a PhD in chemistry, studying toxin formation in vape device aerosol. Dr. Shawna advocates for science-based safety parameters to protect consumer health and has worked with policymakers to implement sensible regulations to protect public health and maintain access to regulated cannabis products. Thank you for joining us. And also Audra Horridge. She drives product development and innovation by using her extensive hardware knowledge to continuously improve all aspects of active hardware, from internal performance to design and troubleshooting. Her skill at guiding active as well as educating clients comes from her years at her own business, one of the first cannabis contract manufacturing facilities, where she developed and produced products for over 50 top cannabis brands in California. We've got a great group today, so let's get started. Let's talk about the current state of the vaporizer marketplace, the current safety standards, lack thereof, and regulations for cannabis vaporizers, and maybe how they're evolving. Shawna, will you please kick us off?
Sure. So, as we're probably all very familiar, vape is the second most common cannabis product on the market. And there's a lot, it's a very complex product. And so that adds many challenges into the marketplace. One thing that I specialize in at True Terpenes is the ingredients that can go into the cannabis extract that is then vaporized. And a lot of times companies will use exogenous ingredients, which means ingredients that come from other sources than the cannabis plant. So oftentimes like botanical terpenes and other flavor compounds. And the issue that can arise here is that manufacturers really have the ability to add whatever they want into these extracts. So it's really important as an industry that we do safety research on these compounds and make sure we're only using compounds that are not going to produce significant harm to the consumer. This research is really in its infancy. I'm working on creating a standard that can be used by manufacturers and also regulators, but I think we'll talk about that a little bit later today.
Great, thank you. Audra.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, as Shawna was mentioning, this research is in its infancy. This industry is in its infancy. We are in great positions to really mold the way that this industry goes. Something that I'm very passionate about is really creating correct use case regulations for these devices. A lot of the regulations are pulled from other industries. You know, e-cig is close, but it is so far away all at the same time, given the nature of the liquid that is inside the devices. And so the safety standards across states and countries vary widely. And I really hope to see more unity and more actual use case, applicable use case testing that is specific to these devices.
Great, yeah. Darwin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just following up those great points. It's really interesting how we have to work within different regulatory frameworks. So different states, right, and whether it's from marijuana or from hemp, will regulate vape products differently. And in some cases, you have some bans for ingredients, you have some requirements for hardware, whereas in a lot of cases, for on the hemp side of the coin, you really don't have that same regulatory oversight. So there's, just like with having to deal with different licensing and the operational challenges of just being in business here, needing to navigate the different regulatory frameworks and what you have to comply with and these for these products is challenging.
Yes, lots of challenges across the board in this industry. So some common issues with design and functionality associated with these vaporizer devices. What are those, and what are some steps that both manufacturers and consumers could take to prevent that? Let's start with you, Darwin.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Bethany, for sure. I think what do we know common issues that we're seeing in the market, right, for devices, especially as if you're a consumer, right? So clogging is probably number one, and up right up there would be leaking. So you've got your device, you just bought a gram of some awesome live rosin or something like that, and 2 or 3 hits into it, it just completely fails because it's clogged and there's no way that you can salvage it. Or you have a different product that you got that's maybe a formulated extract and it gets really hot out one day, you left it in your car and you come back to it and it's completely all over the inside of your pocket or your cup holder or whatever it is. And that has a lot to do back to kind of the design of the devices themselves. We've got a lot of variability with different input materials. So that can be, kind of hard to design around, which I'm sure Audra can allude to a lot more than I can.
Yeah, thanks, Darwin. The vaporizer space is so interesting because I think as a whole, with brands and end users, they expect this tiny device to be perfect and to solve all of their problems, right? And there's so many variables that go in, like Darwin was saying, the input material, how you fill your device, and how the end user, how the device is built, obviously, is our responsibility at Active. And then how the brand fills it is another way that there can be an issue that arises where if you fill it too hot, the viscosity is too low, it's too thin for the device. And then once it gets into the consumer's hand, how the consumer handles it. So there could be a perfect storm of all these little variables coming together for a device to end up failing. Or the device is perfect, the filling is perfect, and the end user messes it up. Or the device isn't perfect, the filler is perfect, the end user is perfect. There's so many different little variables that can cause a failure. But a lot of the time, we focus on the device itself for being faulty. And I think we need to realize that there's a lot of handling through many different hands, and it might not just be one component that causes it to fail, rather than a culmination of a bunch of different factors, such as viscosity, heat. It really does come down to viscosity mainly, but also how you use the device. As Darwin was saying, clogging is a big one. That is also from filling, but it can be just how you smoke the device and how you store the device. And there is a certain level of clogging that is acceptable in devices. It's a natural process of oil building up, condensating, and collecting in these devices. And there's a certain level of clogging that is not acceptable, right? And so understanding when you have a device that is clogging in a very bad and unacceptable way, and when you have a device that is going through its natural life cycle towards the mid to the end of the device, where there may be some residue that is accumulating naturally. So yeah, there's all these different issues, and there rarely is one finger to point at one particular cause. We all need to be mindful about how we manufacture, fill, and handle these devices for the best performance.
Yeah, and Audra, actually, when you reminded me of another issue there. So like whether if the device isn't working perfectly, it doesn't necessarily saturate efficiently. So instead of it clogging or leaking, like draining
Mm.
out of the device too quickly, it's not actually saturating quickly enough. And so sometimes that can lead to burning or changing of flavor over time. And it's just that's another common issue you might see in related to devices that are out there.
Thanks to you both. In my case, I just drop it on the concrete and it shatters and I have to go buy a new one. So, all right, moving on. So that's sort of the design and functionality risks there. Let's get into the potential health and safety risks associated with using poorly manufactured or unregulated cannabis vaporizers, and really how consumers identify the safer options there. Audra?
Yeah, definitely. I've had the privilege of, being in China multiple times and being able to, see the different layers of manufacture and the different processes that, that these devices go through, and the quality control or lack thereof. Um, and seeing how that relates to our devices and seeing other devices. One of my biggest gripes is when I see a lot, not a lot, but there is a pretty popular company. I would say they're maybe number 4 in the space, and they use a lot of adhesives, and you can see these adhesives through the glass on the cartridge. And I believe that adhesives are used in lieu of more stringent tolerances, because you do have to discard or QC out 20+% of your pieces if they do not fit your spec. But you don't have to do that when you're using adhesives. So overuse of adhesives in lower quality hardware is one of my biggest gripes. Another gripe is the ohm of the coil. The coil can have a variance of ohm, and the ohm is directly related to how much power that coil generates. And so in between two devices, you could have an ohm variance that's very great and can actually contribute to 2 very different experiences and 2 very different flavors. So also an unregulated or poorly manufactured vaporizer would also have a high ohm variance. There's so many different things. Also, we saw a unfinished ceramic mouthpiece, like it was very poorly glazed, and the inside of the mouthpiece was just raw ceramic. So silica inhalation, we need to do more studies on that, but from other industries, we know that is not healthy. That is a concern. So making sure that each component is properly processed. They can all stack up. And I know Darwin also has some concerns about the ceramic, not in the mouthpiece, but I believe the atomizer, correct?
Yeah, for sure, Audra. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, everything we've kind of touched on so far, I'm really excited to talk about our standards initiative within ASTM, but these are all kind of like uh, material specifications or other types of specifications we need. These are all critical components. And within other industries, right, you would have a design spec or a material spec that you need to meet to know that it's fit for purpose. And so so especially this advanced ceramic device, really what these tiny little atomizers are, right? It's a heating cell that has an exposed wire, right? That's basically surrounded in a ceramic shell. And that ceramic is going to go through a lot of different heat stresses, right? It's going to heat up, it's going to cool down. So not only do you have to consider the chemistry and the actual molecular structure of that ceramic core and how that can impact what it's made out of, basically, right? A lot of these materials are sourced from potentially questionable locations, right? Mined from areas that might have a lot of elemental impurities. And if you're going to go through those heating cycles, does that mean that we're inadvertently inhaling heavy metals or creating toxic chemicals from gases and interactions between, say, the ceramic core, materials that are in it, the conductive wiring? There's a lot of nichrome and ceramic or stainless steel that's being used here. What's going on when those are oxidizing various different chemicals or reacting with the environment? That is I guess that the engine, so to speak, of the vaporizer, right? So there are certainly questions there, and understanding more about the possibilities of leachables and extractables that are of a potential concern there is really one of I think a leading issue where we need more research to help us understand what these potential health and safety implications are. Back to kind of the ceramic and those heat stresses, right? They can flake. Ceramic is brittle, right? It can crack, and when it cracks, there can potentially be silica dust. Those can potentially be nanoparticle sized. Nanoparticles we know are known health hazard, and are we inhaling that every time the device is being activated? Those are real questions that our industry needs to address.
Thanks for that.
I was going to say, let alone just the formulation that maybe Shawna could talk to us about.
Yeah, a very real world example that we've seen around vaping safety is around the additives that get put into it. I think we all experienced EVALI in 2019. That was really a wake-up call for the industry that you can't inhale every compound. You can't compare something if it is GRAS approved for edible. It's not going to be safe for inhalation. Those aren't directly one-to-one related things. So it's really important to remember that when we're inhaling compounds, it's gonna be a higher hazard to us than if we ate something. So it's important to do this like in-depth toxicology research on all the ingredients that are going into the hardware. And then also we have to remember that these materials are going to be heated up. So we also need to look at how are these compounds decomposing. And we've seen, you know, acute toxicity, but we also have to factor in long-term toxicity because theoretically we want our consumers and patients to be able to utilize these products for, you know, years to come. So one way that like consumers can try to identify these is look at the cannabinoid percentage if it's listed on the label. Because if you see a really low cannabinoid percentage, like say 60%, that's an indication that they've maybe added exogenous diluents to either reduce cost or, you know, maybe regulations required them to have potency caps. And what we've seen in the research is that these diluents oftentimes are the cause of this significant toxicity. Another thing I see in regulations is that they are trying to regulate around these exogenous ingredients, but they're doing it in a way that's not directly tied to public health and is not supported by scientific literature. A great example is requiring all natural ingredients. Just because it's all natural does not mean it's safe. I mean, vitamin acetate is all natural. Diacetyl is all natural. Heavy metals are all natural. You know, and we know in this industry that we don't want those in our vape pens. We don't want to be inhaling those. So while it is challenging to kind of regulate around these exogenous compounds, there are, you know, true or tested and true methods of toxicology assessment that you can look at a compound and assess, is it going to be safe and at what level is it going to be safe in this vape pen?
If I can jump in, you know, I think some really important points that we've talked about here is, and it can be a little overwhelming at times, right? Like I think about everything that could go wrong that we've discussed, and it's like, holy crap, these products are a little scary. But like, let's think about it, right? It's not just taking cannabis flower and combusting it that folks have done for thousands of years. We're now extracting it. And what are we doing when we're extracting it? What's the purity of that? And to Shawna's point, you know, are we adding, you know, if it says 65% THC, what's the other 35%? Is it terpenes? Is it minor cannabinoids? Okay, maybe that gets you to 85%. What's the other 15%? And then route of administration, GRAS, right? For folks that may not be up on the acronym lingo, is generally recognized as safe. That's for food products. The FDA has that established for food products. That's ingesting. Big difference when you ingest something and your stomach acid breaks it down and it goes through your intestines and gets absorbed into your body versus you're literally inhaling directly straight shot right to your lungs. That's a completely different route of administration, and the sensitivity of our lungs is critical, right? So we really need to think about those things and then add in the ceramic coils and the compatibility of the hardware and, you know, thermal expansion and contraction. How many times are you heating that device up and what's the performance over time? Does that wear? And you know, things start to break down. Anything mechanical is subject to failure at some point. So there's a lot of things that we need to consider, especially as a brand operator, asking those, if you're a brand that's producing products, asking those types of questions and working with, you know, both companies, right? You can't just talk to True Terpenes, can't just talk to Active. You've got to understand the entire life cycle and how these products work together, right? From a compatibility standpoint. And, you know, there's a lot of research that needs to be done. But we're here now and we're actually starting to work on that research. I think that's really important that we're aware of what the potential risks are.
And just throwing it out there, you had asked Bethany, how can consumers identify? And Shawna mentioned a great option. There's another, like, legit cartridges are going to be labeled, like they're going to come with serial numbers that you can look these up if you were so inclined and wanted to do that. So that's
Yeah.
another, that's another thing to be on the lookout for.
I've been seeing a lot of that. Like someone will have a vape and I'll be like, "Oh, did I make that vape?" And because sometimes they copy our mouthpiece shape or whatever it may be. And so I think it's our vape. And then I look and there's no serial number. It's nothing. It's just a ghost piece of hardware. And most of the top manufacturers will have batch labeling, will have identification of what hardware it is. I know the consumer generally looks for the brand. Like, I like this, this cookies or this, full spec or whatever region you're in. What hardware that is not at the forefront of your mind. But as a consumer, you can look for active hardware. You can look for other different hardwares that are from reputable companies by looking at the laser engrave marking on the bottom of the cartridge, usually by the 510 thread. I did also just want to mention that what Shawna said about the potency, if that's a distillate cartridge, then yes, a lower potency is a little bit suspect. Some extracts, live resins, have a combined THCA and THC percentage that will be lower naturally, rosins and live resins. So they will be in the 70s, sometimes in the 60s naturally, and that does not have any additives. But on the flip side, there are distillates and other supposed to be high potency extracts that are diluted and that do have additives in them that are in excess.
Great. I think it was mentioned earlier, the EVALI situation from a few years ago. Let's talk about, the notable case studies, the real life examples where improper vaporizer safety led to significant issues. And what were the lessons we learned from those incidents? Shawna?
Yeah, I mean, vitamin E acetate during the EVALI crisis is the best example that we have. And I think it was really important for the industry to get that wake-up call and realize that we can't just put whatever we want in these products. Another like real life example is putting exogenous terpenes at too high of concentration. If you have terpenes in there, I would say anywhere above 10%, your consumers are going to have irritation, sneezing. If you notice sneezing, like tickling in your nose, that's a sign of irritation in the body. And that can lead to inflammation. And if you have repeated inflammation over and over and over again, that's going to lead to some serious health concerns.
Oof. Yeah, Darwin, would you like to jump in there?
Well, I really, absolutely. I love that Shawna mentioned the 10% cutoff. That's has been a recommendation, a suggestion that the D37 has been toying around with. It has been incorporated by reference in ASTM standard D8449, which is our label content specification. So, if you put in more than 10%, then it's suggested, right, that you then inform the consumer that, like, hey, this has a lot of terpenes in it versus just the natural amount that might be there. And that alludes to, I think, a really potentially not a major health concern or impact like EVALI, but definitely cases of fraud that we're seeing in the industry currently related to like adulterating live resin, for instance. As Audra was alluding to, like, live resin is going to probably be in the mid 70s. And that's an okay percentage for something that's a raw, live, natural product. It's probably going to have terpenes in the 3 to 9% range, somewhere in there, right? That's going to be something indicative of something that's real or natural. But that doesn't sell necessarily when you're in a marketplace that's on a race to the bottom and you need to have the highest concentration of THC. So you can start to see now live resins and live rosins in vape form that are being sold that have concentrations in the 80s, 90s, at 95% concentration. that is most likely not a true live resin or a live rosin product. And there needs to be, potentially more education for consumers within the marketplace so that they can be aware that these things that have been diluted, like Audra and both Shawna were talking about, either with vitamin E acetate, which we know is no bueno, or other things now, potentially those are products that should be avoided. And the only way that we can really kind of influence that is by making sure that the consumers are informed and they have the information that they need to make a decision on whether or not they want to buy something that's been diluted or adulterated in some way.
Yeah, thank you for that. I remember that very well. A few people going to the hospital, definitely some major concerns during that time. Perfect segue into talking a little bit more about consumer education and what role it plays to ensure that the customers are educated to use vaporizers safely. And if you have any specific resources or strategies that you recommend to get these consumers educated. Audra?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a huge missing piece. Again, we are in our infancy. We're still figuring out, as a whole, how to use these devices and make them work the best for us. I believe that they are incredible devices to medicate in a very concise way. We're not combusting, we're not inhaling all this plant material or a joint paper. It is a purified extract that you're able to consume personally in lower doses per puff and get the same effect, which is really, really wonderful. But there is still a learning curve on understanding how to use these devices. And I believe that there's a lot of marketing push for brands to market the product and how fire it is. And, obviously at Active, we really, really care about the plant and bringing forward the flavor of the extract. In hand, that actually also works to our benefit because that also addresses heat. Heat is a big thing, thermal degradation and compounds that come from that. I'm sure Shawna can talk about that in terms of additives. But with our no burn technology, that allows the extract not only to taste good, but to be protected from some of the heat. But that also goes in the hands of the user. And the devices have a 10-second shutoff. Most devices in the industry do for safety. But you can still haul on that device for 10 seconds, and depending on your battery, that device can get really hot. So understanding maybe you don't want to take a full 10-second draw on your device, even though it allows you to. Maybe keep that at like 6 seconds or less. Let your device cool down before you haul on it multiple times. I really think that using the devices responsibly, but having the consumer know that they have to use these devices responsibly and they can't just drag on them like they would a joint or other thing. Joints are self-limiting because you're gonna cough. So are vapes, but I think that sometimes people can build up a tolerance to them. For me, I think that more outreach from the brands. We provide some material to our client partners, infographics, some best tips and tricks so that they can promote that on maybe their Instagrams, maybe do some activations in the dispensary. More literature in the dispensaries for education around tips and tricks and best practices. I would like to see a lot more of that in the future. I don't want to go as far as to say regulation for notices or pamphlets or labeling, but maybe some very minimal regulations on what is printed on these boxes in terms of best use. Also going into electronics, how you plug these things in, what you plug them into, being mindful of that, because you can't plug everything into everything just as you would a normal device in your home has proper plugs. When you're plugging in your device, your vape devices, it's no different. So a little electronic education, a little bit of use education, tips and tricks at the brand level on their social media and other marketing, and at the dispensary level with literature is what I would love to see.
Yeah.
I would just add to that. I think all the points that were discussed were great. It's just, I think what we can really see is that unfortunately, consumers are really their first and last source of protection for themselves. So the more they can arm themselves with education, the better. And the more that, say, industry can help generate those resources. It's great that we have companies like Active that are out there, and True Terpenes that create those information, those infographics that are easily digestible for the consumer. And we just need more of that.
Yeah, I think that's such important concepts there. You know, it's like it's an all of the above approach, right? We're doing the research, we're developing the standards, we're working with regulators, we're understanding where the risks are, and then there's a major consumer component, and that's, you know, really incumbent on the brands and ultimately the dispensaries, the ones that are, you know, engaging frontline with the consumers. And I think it's really important for us to all remember, especially folks that maybe, you know, more seasoned consumers, or, you know, we all live in the bubble because we work in the industry every day, that this is still novelty to a lot of consumers. This is still new. And so to assume that they just understand what we're talking about, you know, using a vape cartridge, you know, there's opportunities to just, you know, get a little one-pager sheet or something, or a little pamphlet that can be dropped in, you know, for folks that even you've seen them for months coming into dispensaries, to say, hey, little best practices, you know, keep it away from the heat, you know, check for serial numbers, hold it upright, you know, it may leak over time, don't draw for full 10 seconds, like just little things like that, to just basic education to get folks aware. It's hard to do that but that's where we've got the opportunity to work with the dispensaries that are, and the bud tenders, to educate them and have this type of material. There's nothing preventing us from putting that type of material in, you know, out there.
Yeah, another factor of consumer education is manufacturers putting more information on the labels that gives the consumer the information that they need to make the decisions for themselves. Because a big part of toxicology is not completely removing risk, right? Everything comes with risk. So the idea is you want the consumer to be able to weigh the risk versus reward for themselves, and it's going to be subjective for every single consumer. So the more information you give them, the more curious they'll be to look and research that information, and then they'll be able to make an informed consent decision.
Absolutely. We're doing great so far. We have a couple more questions, and we are receiving a ton of questions in the live Q&A, not to mention several that we received in pre-registration. So we may have time to get to those, but just a couple more questions here for the group. How are emerging technologies, innovations, and standards development in the industry contributing to the improvement of vaporizer safety? And what can we expect in the near future? What's in your crystal ball, Darwin?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity here. Just gives me a shameless plug to talk about ASTM International and the D37 and our vape device safety and testing initiative. This is an amazing positive trend because what we're seeing is consumers, industry, and regulators are all culminating and coming together at this like point in time in history, which is just amazing. And we're just kind of the precipice of something really big, and having taken just an idea that, hey, there should be standards in the marketplace to improve device performance and consumer satisfaction, and maybe at the same time make some reduce the level of harm and create some better fit for purpose devices. So that went from an idea to a formed group of some of the largest manufacturers of vape devices in the world, and of course flavor manufacturers as well, two members of which are here on the our webinar today, Shawna and Audra, just showing that industry gets it and they care. We have regulators in attendance as well as consumers, people who, like myself, our primary form of consumption is using a vape device. So we have come up with more than 30 proposed standards that we want to create just for vape devices themselves to help raise the bar, or more maybe appropriately set the bar, so that we're no longer seeing this negative trend of lower quality, cheaper devices. We're seeing a bar set, and maybe we'll start to see higher quality devices start to come out of that, and have taken that enormous effort of 30 some odd plus standards and have concentrated that down to what we think are the 5 most critical standards, and have identified 3 of which that we're going to focus our efforts on over the next year to help improve standards, safety, and quality for these devices. So what we're hoping that we'll start to see over the next months and years is just substantially better, higher quality devices that are truly fit for purpose for cannabinoid products. As Shawna and Audra alluded to earlier, there are a lot of there are standards for e-cigarettes and nicotine devices, which might apply for our marketplace, but maybe they don't. And that's one of the major or efforts that this group is looking to do through this initiative, is really flush out what are the specifications that are needed to ensure consumer safety, but also promote manufacturability and the actual adoption of these standards. Because if we go all crazy, no one's going to adopt a standard. Manufacturers aren't going to be able to actually retool and switch over. So we need participation from groups like Audra's to make sure that we're actually coming up with something that's going to be doable. And with the end effort, of course, being able to just make it so that when someone uses a vape device, they know that at least the device itself isn't a potential source of harm. So I'm really excited about that. And I think also just really awesome is 2 other standards that I know Shawna alluded to and really very humble about, but she led an amazing group effort to develop what I think will be some of the most 2 of the most substantial standards to come out of the D37 to date. And those will hopefully provide regulators with the tools they need to, instead of just banning in non-cannabinoid ingredients and creating these flavor bans that we're starting to see pop up in marketplace to marketplace, instead we can give them a tool to actually now make informed regulatory decisions on different types of non-cannabinoid ingredients.
Well said, Darwin. We could have a whole episode, and I think we have, and probably will again on, ASTM and the process. Just a quick plug, grab your Sharpie marker, grab a Expo eraser. You'll look really closely. You'll see conforms to an ASTM standard written right on it. Get involved. If you are interested in any of this discussion and want to weigh in, want to be able to vote on the standard as it's going through the balloting process, it relies on all volunteers, from consumers, advocates, public health experts, et cetera. We've got over 600 members, but there's no limit. So go to astm.org, learn more, reach out to one of us, and come join the effort and participate.
Perfect plug. Appreciate that. Yes, and David put in the chat the astmcannabis.org URL, so you can find out more about that.
Yeah, get involved. We love new members. More help, more wisdom, more opinions. Yeah, I can continue on with this standards development, trends, and product standardization. Something that I alluded to in the beginning is just real use case and understanding these devices for what they are and how they are used, and developing standards and laws and guidelines specific to these devices. So something that we were doing at Active, we were doing toxicology studies on aerosols, and actually a week before we were about to go, and this is a huge study, I called the researchers, and I called a meeting, and I said, I don't think we should use Caresta. Caresta is the e-cigarette vaping protocol, which is a 3-second puff every 30 seconds for the life of the device. No rest, no nothing. They just collect the aerosol 3 seconds every 30 seconds. That's not the real use case for a cannabis device. It's not even the real use case for a nicotine device. A little bit closer, right? But still not the same. So at the 11th hour, we changed the vaping protocol for this toxicology study to better replicate the use pattern of a vape. And then to back that up, we created, with my colleague, Randy Reed, shout out to him, doing a fun thing we call Get High for Science. So to back up like this proposed vaping protocol, we're doing puff topography studies. So these puff topography studies take a vape and put it in a chamber connected to a flow meter with a microsecond processor that analyzes the flow rate of the device. And we have hundreds of samples of people vaping, and we're able to aggregate this data, and we're able to find what is the average puff, the duration, the SLPM, which is like the suction rate, all of these things so that we can better inform our research and that we can pave the way for accurate research in the future. So those are a few things that we're really passionate about, really creating applicable standards for these devices. Yeah.
Excellent. Wow, it does sound like a hefty research.
Yeah.
Doing there. Shawna.
Yeah, so Darwin already plugged the 2 ASTM standards that I'm working on that I'm very excited about. So I hope in the future that standard can be adopted by, manufacturers and regulators, since regulators don't have a framework on how to regulate these like exogenous terpenes and other flavor additives into vape pens. It would be great for them to be able to say, okay, you can add these compounds, but the manufacturer had to go through this ASTM standard. And then another thing that I'm excited about, positive trends in the cannabis industry, is simply that more states are becoming legal medically or recreationally, and more consumers are being able to access these products that really help them, and access products that are safe and have gone through these regulatory requirements and contaminant testing and et cetera. And I'm just very excited to see consumers have access to more of these products.
Awesome. We're coming up on our final planned question here for the webinar, and then we'll try to address some of the pre-reg and live Q&A that came in. All right, so what are some of the regulatory challenges faced by the manufacturers and the retailers in ensuring vaporizer safety, and how can these challenges be effectively addressed? Darwin?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've kind of alluded to it here a couple times with the flavor bans and other things, but really it's having changes to regulations every 6 months, every 12 months, every 18 months, right? As regulators figure new things out, right? That's really the most challenging aspect for licensed operators, as well as for device manufacturers. And being able to build in transitional periods into those requirements is really important. But having the tools, as we've alluded to here, can help provide that information that can prevent some of these overarching reactions to issues we see in the industry now, right? So that's why the 2 standards that we helped create that are just closed balloting, and we're like right there. These are like, I can't believe how many how little negatives were received on these standards. It's a little geeking out on standard stuff, which nobody needs to worry about, but it's just important because having these tools can prevent just all-out bans and reactionary regulatory frameworks from being developed. So we're now actually being able to provide more stability and legitimacy to the marketplace by creating some of these standards, specifically those tools that allow not only product manufacturers and flavor blend producers, but regulators to do an actual toxicological risk-based assessment on non-cannabinoid ingredients.
I think just to your point, to add and to go back to kind of Audra and the topography studies, right? Like that's the exciting stuff, that when these negatives are generated in questions, a lot of times they're like legitimate questions in a way to say, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? Or, we need this aspect. It's the research and the data that, Active's doing that can inform and justify, hey, yeah, we thought about that. Here's what, 450 data points across a spectrum of people from, 30 to 55 years old or whatever, the data has shown. And that's really what informs these types of standards. And that's what we need, right? We need this research, we need this data, and science is always evolving. So it's really exciting, and trying to keep up with the regulations and the safety parameters based on the latest research is just part of the equation, right? And the evolution of the industry as we get more mature, as more states come online, as Shawna mentioned, we've got lots of research out of Health Canada where they've had less federal restrictions and the ability to do research. There's been some great presentations as well that we're incorporating into all of these decisions, aka standards and guidance. So I'll pause there because I know we've got lots of exciting things to try to get through in the last few minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand regulators are doing the best they can. There's no framework around inhaling these compounds. They want to, kind of cover their own butt. They don't want anything bad to happen to consumers in their states, and I get that. But I would shout out to regulators to invite scientists of all different disciplines to the table. I see a lot of regulations that go into place that make no sense. There's one state that adopted some HPHC list that the FDA proposed years ago. It was never adopted. But that regulator decided anything on this list you can't use, even though the FDA doesn't even agree with that. So it's like, that tells me that maybe they didn't really understand what that list was. So invite scientists, invite them from all different disciplines and listen to their feedback.
If I can just plug that, I call a scientist. That is, nonstop. Whether you're a regulator, whether you're industry, if you're an industry operator and you don't have a scientist on staff, get one yesterday. Like you need, ideally a qualified one. There's only so many Shawnas around, Dr. Shawnas, but look around. You need that type of a team. There's a lot of folks out there. There's experts. A lot of folks will volunteer, especially with state working groups. Those opportunities exist. We've seen it work. Call a scientist.
Love that. Audra, do you have any thoughts to add to this?
Yeah, I just think, understanding real use case. I heard just a recent thing out of Canada that they're now limiting failures to 0.25% for all-in-ones. And it's like, where did this number come from? Do they realize that failures can be spurred by end users? It's not always the hardware, but then the hardware gets investigated for the smallest issues. So it's challenging because like Shawna was saying, arbitrary things get put into motion because I get it. We don't have all the research behind us and we're desperately trying to generate this stuff. And so there's a lot of research that's in progress that if you do call a scientist or ask someone, they may be able to let you in on the work that they're doing that can properly inform your decisions. Also, ASTM is doing work to properly inform these regulatory decisions. So not arbitrarily putting industries' industries' laws onto things is a big challenge in this industry currently.
Excellent. So we have about 5 minutes left of our hour, and we received what feels like 40 questions from our audience. And we've had an opportunity to answer a few of them incorporated. For my panelists, I have dropped these questions in our chat here. If any of them are jumping out to you,
there was one that said, why should consumers trust any hardware originating in China? I think this is a stigma that we all hold for good reason, but also I think it is a stigma and we do need to address that. There are plenty of incredible GMP facilities. Ours is one of them in China that produce these products. Also, I think having the being a stateside company also brings some of those, stateside values into the production process. But, GMP is GMP. The track record of the company is, it is something that you want to lean on as well, understanding their history and business. And so focusing less on the region and the stigma around the region and more around the certifications and the successes of the business and the trustworthiness of the business is really what you want to focus on. And we have a whole video going inside of our factory on our website too, if you're interested in looking at, you have an idea of what a Chinese factory looks like, and you can see what ours actually looks like. So there are a lot of resources. Not a lot of companies are that open, but I will assure you that there are amazing facilities in China that that are very, very impressive and very, very high quality, producing very, very good products. Yes.
I think that just kind of underscores the concept of supplier qualification generally. And, no matter where you are in the supply chain, where are you buying your raw ingredients from? Where are you buying your hardware from? Looking at objective metrics like, are they GMP certified? Do they have certain qualifications, versus just the location? Like, is Portland, Oregon the place to say, if you're from Portland, you're qualified, but you're from Boulder, you're not? Like, that's not a real objective criteria to use. I've got go ahead, Darwin, and then I was going to suggest a question here.
Oh, I was just going to jump on one of the questions, but if you
Yeah,
wanted to
do it.
suggest,
Yeah,
please
do
go.
it.
There was one in here from Trillion related to health concerns and/or improvements to all-in-ones. Awesome. I love it, because those are definitely one of the 30 standards we proposed within the Vape Device Safety and Testing Initiative, was to, in fact, do that, help propose design specifications for all-in-ones. Too important, because I think that also addressed another question, is a design spec for requiring the removability of the battery and the microchips portions of it, so that that can be disposed of separately, right, from potentially any cannabis residues, wastes, and other things like that. And then the other is maybe a design spec to prevent the airflow pathway from going over the microchips. Did you know that you just breathe over all the lead soldering in all those all-in-ones?
Not everyone uses lead solder though, but yes, it is a practice that some employ. And air path could be diverted, or we could make standards. But also research also, I think I just want to just really quickly say, we can say, oh, there's silica, oh, there's heavy metals. Have we tested it? Are the heavy metals actually transferring? Is the silica actually transferring? Our research says not as much as you think. These levels are actually relatively safe, and we still have a lot of research to do, but I don't want to fearmonger and think like, oh, like this and that. We got to do the research, and we got to make sure that we're backing it with proof.
Yeah, I definitely want to jump on that really fast. What Audra was saying around fear mongering, it's really important when we're talking about contaminants to really understand the levels that the consumer is being exposed to. One great example is with heavy metals. The limits that are usually set by states are based on a FDA pharmaceutical limit that is assuming 5 grams exposure every day. That is about 10 times higher than the highest cannabis consumer is getting exposed to. So we really got to kind of put it in a whole real world use picture.
Great. We have reached the top of the hour. I will send the questions around to our panelists to see if we can provide any additional answers later on our blog and in the follow-up email. Of course, the recording will be available on our YouTube probably by tomorrow. As we're wrapping up here, thank you so much for an amazing webinar. Thanks to everybody who attended live. As a reminder, all of our past episodes can be found on the GMP Collective's website, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about working with us, we offer strategic advising, subject matter expertise, data-driven solutions, and more, all designed to elevate your business operations. You can secure your success for your business now by visiting gmpcollective.com to schedule a consultation. David, any final words? No? Great.
Be sure to get registered for next month's webinar. It's going to be another great episode with leading trade organizations speaking. So the link will come out soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thanks for coming, guys.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.